Hello. Good afternoon from Europe. Good morning to everyone in the United States and across the pond. I'm Kristine, Berzina, a senior fellow with ASD's Alliance for Securing Democracy in Brussels. Thank you for joining us for this 5th edition of GMF's Face Off debate. Maybe you've been here with us before. This is our special debate format, 1 question, 2 opinions, 30 minutes. It's an express debate on one of the most controversial and pressing issues in Europe today. It's relations with China on emerging technologies. So the question we're posing is, on 5G, is Germany selling out Europe to China? We're delighted to have with us first member of European Parliament, Reinhard Bütikofer. He is chair of the European Parliament's delegation for relations with the People's Republic of China and a member of the group of Greens. Reinhard will be debating the yes side of the debate. And debating the no side, we have Julia Friedlander, the C. Boyden Gray Senior Fellow and Deputy Director of the GeoEconomics Center at the Atlantic Council of the United States, joining us from Washington. Both debaters have agreed to argue one particular side of this debate, although both have nuanced views on this question. This is a fun debate, a quick way to explore the various dimensions of this argument and of this issue today. In past debates, we've even seen the speakers switch sides over the course of this half an hour. So we have concrete points of view from both sides. And first, we're going to do a little bit of a poll because we want to know what you, our audience, also thinks about this. We're also going to do a poll at the end to see whether our 2 speakers have changed any of your minds. So with that, I am going to be launching this poll to see whether you agree initially with the yes side or the no side. Give you another 15 seconds to answer. Okay, so another 5, and then we'll see what the answers are. As you can see, we have, 63% of respondents say that on 5G, yes, Germany is selling out Europe to China, and 37% say no, that is not the case. So we'll see where we wind up at the end. Write that down before we forget. All right, so on to the arguments. Reinhard, over to you. You have 5 minutes to present initial arguments. There's a buzzer that will show up on the other slide, and I'll tell you when you're out of time. So we could see the buzzer and we have the timing ready. Super, go.
Okay, thank you for having me. When we talk about Germany and 5G and Huawei, we have to talk about Chancellor Merkel because she has been shaping Germany's position on these issues more than anybody else. And I would start by saying the Chancellor has learned one very important political lesson from her early mentor, Helmut Kohl. You can turn hesitation into a political weapon. And Germany, under her leadership, is selling out Europe by hesitating. Germany has failed to take an early and clear position, and it fails the rest of Europe because of that. All member states are confronted with China's pressure, and Germany should have been taking a leadership role in forging a common approach there. Not having done that, everybody finds themselves forced to find their own wiggling room or to risk the wrath from Beijing. Instead of uniting Europe, Germany has been dividing Europe on this issue. Germany doesn't do that because there are no serious doubts about the character and the severity of the risks. The national security community in Germany has been exceedingly clear about what they are. Nor is it because we would want to resist being pressed into a confrontational approach like the one that the US has chosen over these issues vis-a-vis China. There would have been the Australian way, basing a decision on the objective rule of law criteria. So I would say this is an example of what's been called an automotive tilt in Germany's China relations. The Chinese ambassador to Berlin has openly played that card at a public event Handelsblatt organized more than a year ago, when he hypothetically, of course, without meaning to say that, threatened that China could retaliate against the German automotive industry. So it is a case of defensive selfishness that mirrors the fact that some German multinational corporations have put too many eggs into that one Chinese basket. The German government has been heavily criticized over its stance on Nord Stream 2 because of the dependency from Putin's regime that this policy fosters. Well, I would say Huawei is Nord Stream 2 squared, because it's not about a technology that's seen its best day, like fossil fuel, but about the communication backbone of future industrial ecosystems. The fact that China uses the Huawei card aggressively in the CAI negotiations over the investment deal, even after official conclusion of an agreement in principle, demonstrates two facts. A, Huawei is by no means a private economic actor. Such a thing doesn't exist in Xi's China. It's part of the party-state tech complex. B, China uses Huawei to put pressure on the EU because the lack of unity for which Germany carries big responsibility weakens the EU. And C, the Bundestag should amend the necessary regulation by basing it clearly on national security grounds. Germany does have a choice. Its overall export dependency on China is just about 8% of overall exports. In the Australian case, that number is 4 times as big. If Germany would dare doing what the far more dependent Australians have done, she would at least catch up with her smaller neighbors. So I think, deplorably though it is a fact, Germany has failed Europe and sold out to China.
I commend you for your quick remarks. Thank you. Julia, how about the no side?
Thanks, Christina, for having me, and it's an honor to do this with Reinhard. Germany is not selling out Europe to China on 5G. It can sell itself if it wants to, but not Europe. Let's start with the standard-setting power of the European Union. The EU issued an extensive toolbox of risk mitigating measures for the security of 5G networks just about this time last year. This included guidance on the use of various regulatory powers, treatment of third parties, ensuring identification of supplier, as well as the sustainability and diversity of value chains. It's 50 pages long. It's a real thing. And member states have an obligation to report on the measures they've taken. EU guidelines are, of course, non-binding. These are, at least, and you could quibble about the value of a non-enforceable framework. But let's take a look at what member states have done regardless. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Czechia, Poland, Romania have each in their own way signed on to the Prague Principles from 2019, an extensive set of security measures largely reflected in the EU document. Denmark has put its foot down and said no entirely. So has the UK, no longer EU, still important. The Netherlands, France, and Italy, while not making it explicit, have implemented rigorous standards that de facto exclude Chinese 5G providers. Spain and Portugal are not all that far behind. For France, this might be the promise of a new industrial base. For Italy, this is despite of, or perhaps because of, the MOU with the Belt and Road Initiative that riled many international observers. And yet, what are we reading? It's France, not Germany, which seems to have recently courted Huawei's first plant outside of China. Now, Reinhard mentioned CAI. We're not really talking about the investment deal today, but one minor point in response. China's efforts to reinsert the market access clause, closing off the benefits of CAI to those who exclude Huawei, is ham-handed, and Brussels isn't falling for it. Didn't a few weeks ago, won't again. Then there is NATO. Don't forget NATO. The other end of Brussels has also taken up the mantle from a secure communications, intelligence, and military interoperability standpoint. Will Belgium jeopardize housing NATO because of existing telecommunications contracts? I highly doubt it. Maybe the EU and NATO are two different bubbles, but they work like lassos in their own way. So if you go sit in the government, as I did for the last decade, you start to see the elements converge, right? And it's always messy in the process. Germany has also not yet sold itself. Berlin is doing what it often does best when faced with an inconvenient economic truth. It's kicking the can. Admittedly, you can kick a can for so long that you end up with a junkyard, but we're not there yet. Germany's new standards are as tough as the others. In fact, relatedly, more stringent investment security rules were tabled just yesterday. And the US Commerce Department may not keep Huawei on the entity list either. God is in the details. So what you're lacking here is, on the German side, perhaps political rhetoric, right, or symbolism. And symbolism is, well, let's not confuse short-term, short-lived mercantilism for lasting policy. That's what Huawei's funding of the CDU leadership convention was. Short-sighted, colorblind, not permanent. And moods continue to change. People receive intelligence briefings. Let's remember also that no one cared about 5G until 2018, besides telecommunications experts and regulators. Sitting in the White House, it was entirely new to me. And if it was new to me, a former intelligence analyst tasked with looking at financial risks to national security, it was probably new to a lot of other people. Let's remember that China wasn't on the transatlantic agenda until 2017, really. 2020 hindsight shows that this was foolish, but we forget in the heat of the moment how fast transatlantic consensus has moved over the course of 4 years. And that with a US president who wasn't so sure what allies did for him at all personally. I had a history professor in college who used to ask his class, pretend you were an alien coming in from outer space and looking at this issue. Would you see more division than convergence? Look, Germany has many reckonings. On the debt brake, we're seeing a big debate over that right now, on domestic demand, on gas, where I'm not sure things are really going in the right direction. But here, I think they are. And I look forward to the conversation now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Reinhard, so back to you. Julie had two overarching points. One of them is that Germany isn't selling out the EU, and then two is that Germany is not selling out itself. What do you think?
Oh gosh, where are we? Do you hear me still?
We hear you. We don't see you.
Okay, good. I don't see you. Look, the one argument, the first argument that Julia made was a very well relieving one from the point of view of those in Germany that are shunning responsibilities. Our neighbors do the right thing anyhow, so why would Germany bother to offer leadership? I'm not one of those who find that a very acceptable argument, because what we see is the development of a patchwork in dealing with the Huawei challenge, when we would need common action. I completely agree with Julia that the European Commission has tried to fix the problem as best it could. The toolbox was a very valuable contribution. It helped aligning countries better than they would have otherwise. but Brussels cannot fix what the most powerful capitals fail to do. And this hesitancy to lead on the German part has already had practical effects. Telecom operators have gotten more deeply involved with Huawei than they otherwise would have. And they are now putting pressure on policymakers, on members of parliament, on regulators, not to tell them that they should sever their relations with Huawei. And I have seen that China has been trying to pressure those cocky European governments, which have laudably taken their own stance. You see what they're about to be doing to Sweden, because Sweden has decided to exclude Huawei, and Germany allows a situation where these countries are up against Chinese pressure campaigns on their own. This should not have happened, and this is a big, big failure.
Thank you. And on the selling itself?
Well, of course, there's always hope in the parliament. I just had a debate about CAI that ended with the hope from the European Commission that the parliament would contribute its own voice to forcing the Chinese side to make concessions that Commission had failed to negotiate. I would, of course, be happy if the German parliament, if the Bundestag would end up doing what would have been the right thing to do from the first moment, which is, as I said, follow the Australian example. But this is still a really very tough battle, and the chancellor herself has obstinately blocked any efforts to forge a majority in the parliament by not allowing the MPs from her own party to vote their conscience. I would suspect if there was a free vote in the German parliament today, the liberals, the Greens, the Social Democrats would vote in favor of a solution that effectively shuns Huawei, and also a majority of the CDU-CSU group. But for the time being, Germany's position is the chancellor's position, and that is the wrong position and must be overturned.
Thank you. Julia, so what do you think?
I think that policy making comes in fits and starts. And I would say that making immediate flip decisions was a characteristic of the Trump administration in a way that forced us to actually walk back some of the measures we had taken because of some of the technical details. So again, iterative processes are valuable, okay? I'm not going to disagree with Reinhard on the dynamics of German politics, that he would know more than anyone else. But I would say that, in conversations that I've had with private industry and with government, it seems to me that you need to suffer a little bit to learn a lesson. Okay, and so that can happen rather quickly, and I'm seeing some of the attitude among the private sector in Germany changing within the course of a couple of months because they get burned. Again, the Chinese are pretty ham-handed. People are always going to be viable, right? Lobbyists are there for a reason. But what I would say in response is you see the Chinese lobbying efforts and cheap intimidation tactics. Again, I believe the government of Sweden has strong balls, right? And it is a sort of gasp of when they realize that the tides are turning against them over a remarkably short period of time, giving the course and dynamic of such a complicated policy that balances economics, technical stuff that really very few people understand, intelligence services, and of course, geopolitical rivalries. So let's give it a little bit of time and come back and check ourselves in a year or two.
Reinhard, coming back to you, do you think that Sweden will make it through? Do you think that the other European countries will also, and Germany itself, will learn from its lessons and not be sold?
Well, I have been following the developments in Sweden from afar, but I was much impressed when the Wallenberg family, which represents major industrial interests, and when Ericsson, one of the huge European competitors of Huawei, came out in favor of allowing Huawei to become part of the Swedish network, just because they were so much afraid of having to pay the price as Swedish industry. So far, the Swedish government has not budged because the conservative opposition is more confrontational on that than the governing Social Democrats by themselves would be. But it is an unconscionable risk to allow the Chinese to play European countries one by one. And of course, Julia is right that the European Commission could never accept the Huawei clause that the Chinese side has been now proposing several times. That would immediately strike a death blow to the whole investment agreement, obviously. But the fact that China is coming back with that, even though they know this is not going to succeed, demonstrates something else. They want to impress about everybody the logic that underlies this clause, which is if you don't allow Huawei, which is of course a private company that has nothing to do with a party state in China, then we will retaliate against you as a country. And Germany should take a leadership responsibility by forging I repeat this, a united front in order to avoid such a situation. I do concede that the fact that Merkel has not had her position signed on to by everybody is signaling progress for the German conversation. I've never seen an issue where the national security community really battled so successfully against those who would say Handel über alles, yeah, trade above everything else. This is not an unquestionable and unquestioned universally accepted proposition now, and that signals progress, but it is not enough. We shouldn't do just the best we can, we should do what is necessary.
Thank you, Julia. So where do you stand then on this question of, the transformation? Do you argue that it is enough?
I think it's enough right at the moment, but we have to continue to sharpen the use of economic statecraft tools across the board, right? From investment security to export controls to sanctions to tariff remedies. Now, if China is going to see these things holistically, Huawei not being a private company, we need to break these things down into component parts on our own side and see the broader picture as well. So 5G being a microcosm of all these things at once. But if we're looking at pressure tactics, maybe asymmetrical pressure tactics, how do we then say This is the challenge for Europe and for German leadership, Reinhard, as you say right now. What do we do about Hong Kong? What do we do about Xinjiang? What do we do about the South China Sea? That is where the rubber hits the road. Okay, if you can see concrete action, again, Germany considering sending a frigate out to the South China Sea, that is across government policy, something that also maybe it would have been advocated for by the Defense Ministry or by the Foreign Ministry, but certainly can't get sign off without the view from the top. So we'll consider these things one by one and see, okay, China, you try to intimidate our companies, you try to intimidate us, but we're going to handle this technocratically and not politically, so to speak. So that's my view.
Thank you. And Reinhard, it would be wonderful to see you on camera one more time. So if you could start video, if that's possible. I know sometimes these things.
Okay, I'll try to.
The tech world.
But I'm afraid I might ruin the whole connection if I would.
Okay, so what do you think? Is this technocratic approach going to get us through?
Well, technocracy has its strength, but what I object to is, and I would call that the original sin of European and German China policy, compartmentalizing China policy. This refusal to base an economic decision on the grounds of national security reasoning, that is reflecting this sense of compartmentalization. And this is not good enough because China is not compartmentalizing. They pursue an all-out struggle on all fronts approach. And they have unified leadership, they have unified chain of command, a very centralized decision-making situation. And so I believe that whether you use political tools or technocratic tools, all the tools in the toolbox should be used, but overcoming compartmentalization, that's the challenge that we have not yet taken on seriously enough. And of course, I agree with Julia when she says, let's also look at Hong Kong, let's also look at Xinjiang, let's also look at the South China Sea, let's look at the Himalayan border between India and China, and so on and so on. But none of what China has been doing on all these fronts over the last year has had any impact on the official positioning of the German government, as if all of that had not existed. Maybe a weak statement, maybe a not so weak statement from the foreign minister, but the chancellor refuses to even use the words systemic rivalry. So we've now been debating whether the Nord Stream 2 pipeline should be stopped to send a clear signal to Putin because of the oppression and the Navalny case and so on and so on. Why does the German government not even consider sending a similar signal to Xi Jinping over the totalitarian regime that he has erected in Xinjiang, over the scrapping of the freedoms of Hong Kong? If you don't even manage to integrate that into your economic decisions, you're not up to task.
Thank you, Reinhard. Those are the final statements from our two speakers. We will relaunch the polling to see what you think about where we stand. So here we have 30 seconds for you to see whether on 5G is Germany selling out Europe to China. We are watching the numbers come in. Feels like election day in certain ways. We spent a lot of time doing that this year in a transatlantic think tank. And let's see, 5 more for those who want to participate. Okay. So our numbers have moved. Go to end polling, share results. They have moved, but they've moved further, yes. So we've gone from 63 to 37, and 37 to 71, 30. So more people now at the end of the day see Germany as selling out Europe to China on 5G. I can share those as you see. All right, we can have those up for another second or two. There we have it. Thank you so much to Julia Friedlander and Reinhard Bütikofer for joining us and being such great sports to debate two sides of these very challenging questions. 5G is one dimension of this, and it's a question that's not going to be solved in the next few days. So I'm sure that everyone here will continue following these issues. And thank you for watching the face-off debate with GMF.
And apologies for messing up the video.
You know, it's your forceful debate, even without visual help for that. So we have a wonderful face-off team, Elizabeth, William, Jessica, and others who make these debates possible. Thank you for all of your work, and we hope to welcome you to the 6th debate with more details on that coming soon. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you for tuning in.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Reinhard. Thank you, GMF.
Thank you, Kristine.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.